Revealed, mechanic's incredible act of courage in an emergency leads to unexpected consequences. Jack wiped the grease from his forehead, wiping away the last remnants of his sleepy Tuesday. As a mechanic in Maplewood, the days were generally predictable. He found comfort in the rhythmic clinks of metal, the sharp sense of oil, and the satisfaction of diagnosing the stubborn problems of machinery. But then came the sound that rattled his world, a screeching halt of metal clashing against concrete, followed by an anguished scream. He dropped his wrench and rushed outside, his heart thumping heavily in his chest. The sight was surreal. A young mother was trapped inside a crumpled car, her face twisted in terror, while her daughter screamed from the back seat. Jack felt the rush of adrenaline flooding his system, obliterating the fatigue that clung to him. He moved to the wreck, the crowd circling shocked and speechless, the murmurs barely decipherable. In the heart of his small-town life, Jack felt the weight of expectation in an instant. He was no longer just a mechanic, he was a hero, a savior. He wrestled the door open, meeting fear head-on. She escaped, but as he pulled her out, a gnawing wave of unease began to rise within him, whispering doubts about the world outside the garage. In the days that followed, Jack became the town's hero, but the weight of that title hung heavily on him. A tension felt exhilarating yet suffocating, a conflicting sensation. He read each news headline portraying him as the noble mechanic who might have saved a life. Yet, with the glory came unsettling murmurs about the mayor, the same man who shook hands and smiled at the town's annual barbecue. His name was linked to the very accident that had changed Jack's mundane existence. The story began to seep into Jack's thoughts, unraveling a tale of corruption that seemed to stretch across the very fabric of Maplewood. Jack's instincts churned in turmoil as he uncovered allegations tied to the mayor's office, irregularities in public contracts with a transparency so murky it sent chills down his spine. The accident was not merely a freak incident, it felt orchestrated, revealing paths taken for shortcuts that put lives, including those he loved, at risk. Suddenly, Jack was not just tied to a heroic narrative, he sat at the crossroads of moral obligation and burgeoning fear. His stomach twisted as he contemplated whether exposing the truth would place his family's safety in jeopardy. Should he be the whistleblower or protect his quiet life? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. On an ordinary Tuesday, Jack found himself grappling with an extraordinary conundrum. Should he expose the mayor's hidden ties to a past burdening his relationship with his estranged father? Standing in his cluttered garage, surrounded by the tools that had been his sanctuary, Jack felt the pull of old loyalties versus responsibility, testing the very essence of his principles. In those moments of reflection, he wrestled with the tension of buried emotions: anger at his father, fear of the unknown, desperation for what the right choice might mean. It all felt like a tightening noose, a slow surrender to a weight he couldn't shake. As he closed his eyes, a suffocating silence enveloped him, and the tension was palpable. Jack's mind raced, a battleground of confusion and resolve, mired in the knowledge that the truth could shatter his world. Would silence be cowardice? Or would the act of exposing the mayor bring devastation into his family's life? Clenching the door of his garage, Jack stood at the precipice of change, teetering between loyalties and the haunting silence that beckoned. The air crackled with uncertainty, and the question loomed like a specter in his thoughts: would he bring the truth to light or retreat into the shadows to safeguard the ones he loved? Jack felt the weight of indecision pressing down on him, the grease-stained tools around him resembling a clutter of unresolved thoughts. The noises of the outside world, muffled yet persistent, connected him to reality, a reality he was beginning to deeply question. He inhaled sharply, glancing at the magazine clipping taped to the wall, the headline boldly declaring him a hero. But the truth felt far less straightforward. In the days that followed the accident, each encounter with townsfolk turned into a mirror reflecting the duality of his newfound status. They approached with gratitude, but their warmth masked an undercurrent of expectation that gnawed at him. Jack could hear his father's voice, the cynical tone echoing in his mind about the futility of heroism in a world governed by greed. Every compliment felt like a layer of complexity wrapped around him, an obligation to honor what people believed he had done, yet a temptation to forsake integrity in the face of danger. As he worked on routine repairs, he occasionally stole glances at his phone, the headlines of the mayor's alleged entanglement lurking in his notifications. Jack's heart raced. Could he really be the catalyst for dismantling a complex web that could reverberate through his family? The stakes felt insurmountable. He decided that a more calculated approach was necessary. Jack began researching local policy documents and news reports, piecing together fragments that could bolster his fears or shed light on uncharted territories. Unearthing governance issues was a slow process, but a flicker of resolve ignited within him. He concocted a plan: reach out to a trustworthy journalist who had publicly championed transparency in local politics, someone willing to lend him their ear without judgment. Fear flickered in his chest, closer now than before, but he acknowledged it, transforming his trepidation into raw determination. At least he'd be in control. He would be the one sharing information rather than passively allowing it to fester. With clenched fists, Jack took his phone from the workbench and dialed. "Sarah. It's Jack. I need your help." As soon as he uttered those words, it felt as though a dam inside him broke. The release of tension surged, leaving him breathless and with an unsettling sense of freedom. He wasn't merely a mechanic anymore, he was a voice, a proactive player in a game whose rules were dictated by shadows. The conversation was illuminating. Sarah's insightful questioning prompted him to delve deeper into the motives that lay behind the mayor's actions, spurring him to identify elements of the story he hadn't fully processed. Discussions turned feverish, spiraling into a web of connections he had yet to fully grasp: the mayor's ties with local business owners, the subtle lobbying that shaped Maplewood's policies, and above all, the hidden dangers linked to negligence that could lead to another tragedy. As Jack hung up, adrenaline coursed through him, weaving a tapestry of clarity amid the chaos. Still, doubt clawed at him. Would his revelations put his family directly in harm's way? Was he ready to confront not just the mayor, but the very fabric of his upbringing, which sought to sidestep conflict and silence dissent? Yet, beneath the apprehension simmered a new kind of determination, one tethered to the understanding that silence is often complicity. He would not succumb to fear. The time had come to face the consequences of a burgeoning heroism, and perhaps exposure would galvanize Maplewood into action. However, as he prepared for the next steps ahead, a familiar figure loomed at the entrance of his garage, hands resting on their hips, a hard look in their eyes. It was his father. "What are you getting yourself into, Jack?" In that moment of confrontation, Jack's heart raced anew, aware that the clash of old bonds and new truths would unravel before him. The line had been drawn between loyalty and the undeniable pull of accountability. Jack stood frozen, his father's probing gaze boring into him, each second stretching into an eternity. It was the unspoken question hanging in the air that unsettled him the most: how far was he willing to go? "Dad, I can't just sit back and let this happen," he stammered, scrambling for words that could convey the urgency he felt, but also reassure the man he had admired all his life. "The mayor is involved in something bigger than we know. What if it happens again? What if someone gets hurt? I can't be responsible for that." His father's expression darkened, a storm of disapproval and concern swirling beneath the surface. "You think this is a game, Jack? You think playing hero will solve anything? People expect more than what you can deliver. You have to think about your family, not just yourself." The accusations hit like shards of glass. Jack's resolve began to waver, the very foundation of his purpose rattling. Was he truly just seeking glory, a way to escape the mundane grind of life in the garage? Or was there a sense of justice burning within him that could not be extinguished? "Well, what else am I supposed to do?" Jack retorted, the frustration bubbling up. "Stand idly by while the very system that's supposed to protect us fails? I've seen what can happen when people turn a blind eye. I refuse to be part of that. The air was electric with tension. His father took a step forward, lowering his voice into a measured tone that still held an edge of warning. You're talking about a fight you don't fully understand. You don't know the repercussions, Jack. And I won't let you drag this family into something dangerous. Jack felt the weight of that statement settle over him, but he could no longer ignore the gnawing sensation that pushed him to act. The respect for his father wrestled with his need to seek truth, both equally important yet contrasting. Silence hung with an oppressive finality, yet Jack could feel something shift inside him, a dawning realization of a strength he had not appreciated before. He recognized now that he had the ability to provoke thought, to challenge the silence that had enveloped his family's legacy. Dad, I have to figure this out, he said, standing taller, pushing against the doubts clouding his mind. For once, I need to be brave, not just for myself, but for everyone who is afraid to speak up. The look in his father's eyes morphed into a blend of respect and frustration, realization dawning that his son was no longer the child who sought approval, but a man prepared to carve his own path. Jack's heart raced as the prospect of his own identity came to the fore, a mechanic turned investigator. The subtext of their shared legacy reverberated, revealing a tension between tradition and evolution, a conflict between safety and accountability. As the door swung open wider, letting the sunshine flood into the garage, Jack felt the warmth on his face ground him. This was it, he had to plunge deeper into this murky water he had chosen to navigate. I'll be careful, but I need you to trust me, he said, his voice firmer now. This isn't just about what the mayor's hiding, it's bigger than that. It's about doing what's right even if it scares us. His father hesitated, wrestling with acceptance and worry, but finally nodded. With that simple gesture, an unspoken agreement passed between them. However, just as the tension eased, Jack's phone buzzed sharply, cutting through the calm like a blade. He lifted it cautiously. The notification set his heart racing. A leak had surfaced about the mayor, and the implications were explosive. Dad, he breathed, as he read the details. This is bigger than I thought. Just as he processed the gravity of the situation, a sudden urgency filled the air. He shot a glance back at his father before sprinting toward the door. This wasn't just a story, it was about to become a full-scale confrontation. As Jack stepped outside, prepared to confront the unfolding crisis, the truth loomed before him like a rising storm, both exhilarating and terrifying. He barely understood the depths of what had just begun to unravel. With each step toward his future, Jack felt the echo of his father's concerns linger, but his determination overshadowed all lingering doubts. The line was drawn, and as he sprinted toward the inevitable chaos, he sensed the uncharted territory of accountability unfolding ahead of him. He was ready to embrace the turbulence of change, the answer still waiting for him just out of reach. The question flickered in the back of his mind: would he have the courage to face the fallout of his discoveries, or would he find himself sinking beneath the very weight of accountability he sought to elevate? Jack raced down the street, his pulse quickening with every stride. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, racing faster than his legs could carry him. He needed to piece together the fragments of information contained in the notification from his phone. The mayor's scandal wasn't just a rumor, it was a significant breach of trust that could ensnare innocence in its wake, including himself. As he turned the corner, Jack's resolve solidified. The truth had a way of bubbling to the surface, and now it was up to him to plunge into that depth and bring it to light. Fear twisted in the pit of his stomach, but he welcomed it. Fear was a reminder he was alive, that he was about to step into a situation far greater than the comfort of his routine at the garage. His breathing steadied as he approached the plaza where the rally was set to take place. Driven by the motivation to unveil the mayor's secrets, Jack felt a strange blend of adrenaline and concern for those who might not know the real dangers looming over them. The atmosphere hummed with anticipation and anxiety. Jack spotted Matt, a colleague from the shop, who looked equally uneasy, hovering at the edge of the crowd. Matt's brow furrowed, he was gripping his phone tightly, the screen illuminating his face. Did you hear? Someone leaked documents implicating the mayor in embezzlement and worse. They say there's a huge cover-up going on. The chaos of the moment pressed in on Jack. He took a deep breath. We have to get to the truth before it's overshadowed by rumors. People deserve to know what they're getting involved in. Are you really thinking of doing something? Matt asked, the skepticism in his voice unmistakable. You could get hurt. You don't know what the mayor's crew is capable of. A flicker of doubt passed through Jack, but he quickly suppressed it. If we stay silent, more will suffer. I can't just watch this unfold. Matt studied him for a moment, and Jack could see the conflict in his friend's eyes. He recognized the weight of expectations, both from others and himself. In that instant, Jack realized he was no longer just a mechanic but an emerging force for change, someone who could no longer afford the luxury of indecision. I'm in, Matt said, a sense of resolve edging into his tone. Let us figure out what we're dealing with. Together, they pressed toward the stage, the growing crowd pulsating around them. Jack felt a sharp contrast between the electric energy of the rally and the fear bubbling within. Each interaction with the people around him, friends, neighbors, former customers, reinforced his conviction. He had to protect them, to face whatever truths lay ahead. As he neared the podium, Jack filled with a mix of determination and anxiety. The mayor's familiar figure loomed ahead, ready to take the stage amidst cheers and banners, carrying an image of authority. Jack's heart raced. Did anyone know what this man could be hiding behind his polished smile and reassuring gestures? Give me a few minutes, he told Matt, just before stepping away into the throng. He felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, but this was no longer just about him, it was about everyone who had been failed by the system. That he caught sight of a small group huddled around a laptop, the glaring screen showing a series of scandalous emails linked to the mayor. Jack pivoted toward them, the need for clarity boiling in his veins. The time had come to gather information, to confront the reality of his fears head-on. As he moved in closer, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was a premonition, a disturbance in the air that thrummed with potential danger. Just as he leaned in to ask about the emails, he noticed a shadow at the edge of his vision, a figure who didn't fit the crowd. Jack's gut churned. He had ventured deep into a storm of secrets, and now he would have to navigate not only the truth but also the very real threats lurking in the shadows. His pulse quickened again. What would he discover, and at what cost? The answers loomed ahead, tantalizingly close yet perilously distant. Would he face this confrontation ready, or would he find himself unprepared for the fallout of his courageous choices? Jack's heart hammered in his chest, each thud echoing the urgency of the moment. He instinctively scanned the crowd, searching for the shadowy figure. Something about its demeanor struck him as menacing, an unwelcome splinter in the otherwise bustling atmosphere. Shaking off the sensation, he leaned in closer to the group by the laptop, their faces illuminated by the glaring screen. The emails flickered by, laden with allegations that resonated with each tremor of his resolve. His instinct drove him deeper into the fray, determination sharpening his focus. Words like kickbacks and shell accounts zipped across the monitor, and he experienced an awakening of sorts, a sense of purpose that filled the void he often felt in the garage. You guys have to get this information out, now, Jack said, steadying his voice. The group hesitated, glancing at one another, cautious of stepping into a maelstrom they barely understood. We wouldn't know where to start, one of them muttered, uncertainty seeping through the bravado. Their concern was palpable, and Jack realized the stakes were even higher than he anticipated. It was no longer just about getting the truth, it was about confronting a well-oiled machine determined to protect itself at all costs. I can help, he offered, a flicker of confidence igniting within him. I've got access to some contacts who can shed light on this. We can spread the word, let people know what's happening. The more eyes on this, the better. Matt's arrival at his side lent strength to his proposal. He's right. I'm a mechanic, not a journalist, but I know people. We can figure this out together. Let's not let fear intimidate us. The initial group remained hesitant, but a few voices joined their resolve, agreeing to approach the problem together. Jack felt a shift within him, a growing sense of empowerment that reached beyond the garage doors that normally confined him. He wasn't just a mechanic, he was becoming an investigator, a catalyst for change. As they began discussing strategies, Jack's awareness of the shadow loomed larger, gnawing at his concentration. It couldn't just be paranoia, he trusted his instincts. Restlessness gripped him as he discreetly tracked the figure. The unknown presence shifted closer, weaving through the crowd almost as if it were searching for him specifically. "Keep your head down," Matt cautioned, noticing Jack's distraction. "We can't afford to draw attention to ourselves." "I know," Jack replied, but the weight of the potential threat overshadowed his newfound purpose. He had crossed a threshold. It wasn't merely about acquiring information anymore, it was about becoming a target. Suddenly, the feeling of surveillance crystallized into clarity as the figure stepped fully into view, revealing a weathered face Jack recognized all too well, a member of the mayor's inner circle. The sight sent a wave of icy dread coursing through him. Years of working in the garage transformed into a potent sense of urgency. He'd seen the man operate before, and he had a reputation for ruthlessness. "Something's not right," he whispered urgently to Matt, who followed his glance and immediately understood the implications. Without thinking, Jack's instincts kicked in. "We need to pull back," he said, raising his voice just enough to be heard over the clamor. "Let us regroup and find another way to handle this." The adrenaline coursed through him anew, shifting his focus from the emails to the real danger that lurked just beyond the periphery. Jack understood now that every choice had consequences, every step forward could lead him deeper into a quagmire of fear and power. But he also realized, perhaps for the first time, that real courage didn't merely lie in seeking the truth. It was about navigating the shadows, confronting threats, and preparing for the storm ahead. But as he turned away, the figure's eyes met his with a piercing intensity, a silent promise that this confrontation had only just begun. Jack felt his resolve harden. The time had come to confront not just the mayor's nefarious plans, but the malevolence that lay in wait. As they slipped into the crowd, the familiar comfort of the garage felt like a distant memory. This unknown world required more than just information. It required vigilance, strategy, and above all, unwavering courage. What further revelations awaited him, and what other threats would emerge from the shadows? Jack steadied his breath, knowing that some paths, once taken, couldn't be reversed. Would he be prepared for what lay ahead? Jack maneuvered through the sea of bodies, a feral pulse of anxiety coursing through him. With every step, he felt a transformative shift, one that stripped away the familiar safety of his mechanic identity and thrust him into a realm where decisions bore weight, consequences loomed large, and shadows concealed intentions. As they found a slightly secluded area, Jack leaned against a cold metal barrier, his pulse racing. "We need to figure out our next move," he said, scanning the faces of his makeshift group. Despite their earlier uncertainty, he sensed that fear was giving way to an emerging resolve. Yet in the back of his mind, his instincts were on high alert. "Jack, what do you suggest?" Matt asked, breaking Jack from his thoughts. His steady tone seemed to anchor the fluctuating energy around them. Jack considered for a moment, drawing from the resources of his past experiences, both in the garage and now in this chaotic scenario. "First, we gather as much information as we can, everything about that figure, and any links to those emails. We need to know what we're up against." He felt the undercurrents of tension ripple through the group, uncertainty morphing into a kind of muted eagerness. It was as if they were poised on a precipice, ready to take a leap that would change the trajectory of their lives. But how? Another voice, Anna, challenged, her brow furrowed. "We're not equipped for this kind of heavy lifting." Jack swallowed hard, his throat dry. This was at a defining moment where he needed to assert his newfound confidence. "I may not be a journalist, but I've learned how to gather information. It's about making connections. I can reach out to some old contacts. They might not be the smoothest sources, but connections still matter. If we can outline the network, the corruption might start unraveling." His own words struck a chord, igniting a burgeoning sense of leadership within him. Was this confidence merely bravado, or had he truly unearthed a piece of himself he had long overlooked? As they organized their strategy, Jack realized this challenge was mirroring his own internal conflicts. He had often felt lost in the grease-streaked world of engines, where every turn felt predetermined. Now, he was confronting human maneuverings complex and concealed. The lack of clarity around what lay ahead forced him to face his fears directly. What if they find out it's us trying to expose them? Matt interjected, his voice grim. What if we end up in danger? Jack's eyes met his, a flicker of understanding passing between them. The question hung heavy, spiraling Jack into a mental maze. But what if the threat of personal danger could be eclipsed by the potential for change? Would he allow fear of the unknown to dictate his actions, to muffle the urgency he felt to combat the malevolence that had begun to unfold? Then we fight back, Jack said firmly, surprising even himself with the raw conviction in his voice. We have to be smart. Anonymity, careful communication, it's about strategy. We can't let fear dictate our next steps. If we do, it's a loss before we even begin. Gradually, nods of agreement followed his words, the weight of tension lifting ever so slightly. In that moment, he understood the profound weight of leadership. It wasn't about feeling invulnerable, it was embracing vulnerability while gathering the strength to act regardless of it. Until he heard a faint sound, a distant murmur threading through the crowd. His heart began to race once more, fueled by an unmistakable sense of urgency. He felt it again, that eye on him, the weight of scrutiny from the very figure he had spotted earlier. Let us move, Jack urged, adrenaline surging through him once more. We need to find a secure spot to regroup. Now. As they melted back into the throng, the sharp reminder of what lay ahead rattled his nerves. The stakes had escalated beyond simple confrontation. They were now venturing into a treacherous battle against a corrupt system, fraught with uncharted territory and hidden dangers. With every step, Jack was aware that there were more questions than answers, yet an undeniable fire ignited within him. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. With each decision, he was forging his identity anew, a reluctant hero thrust into a complex moral landscape. What would be required of him next? With the shadow looming ever closer, he braced himself for the pulse of action, knowing that things were about to intensify, and what lay at stake was more profound than he could have ever imagined. Jack felt the weight of anticipation pressing down on him, each footfall echoing the urgency of their situation. As their group wove through the crowded space, he grasped the importance of the decisions looming over them. They needed not just to act, but to act intelligently, every move calculated to insulate them from unwanted scrutiny while inching closer to the truth. The hum of the crowd was a counterpoint to his racing thoughts. Each face he passed seemed to reflect a potential threat. Meeting of the minds was one thing, but this was different. It was a fight against an unseen entity that stretched beyond their immediate reach. Jack needed to channel the pressure into something productive. Listen up, he said, halting their movement momentarily. The words tumbled out, crisp and clear. We'll split up into pairs and scope out potential leads. I'll take Matt, Anna, you work with Carla. He scanned the group's faces for acceptance and saw something more, a shared sense of purpose, a glimmer of adventure in the face of danger. The shift in energy fueled him. They were ready. Keep your phones silenced, and if you see anything unusual or hear something key, message the group. We'll meet back here in an hour. He felt the thrill of leadership course through his veins. The old Jack the mechanic, content with grease and gears, was slipping away, replaced by a figure determined to carve out a new narrative. As they set their plans in motion, Jack and Matt navigated toward a diner a few blocks away, a place they could survey without drawing attention. They slid into a booth at the back, the disheveled decor blending perfectly with the atmosphere of transient conversations and distracted patrons, providing an ideal cover for whispering plots. Over steaming coffee, Jack leaned in closer. What do you think the implications are if we find something concrete? Serious repercussions, I imagine. The thought sent a shiver through him, but he kept his voice steady. Matt sipped his coffee thoughtfully. We're poking the bear, man. They won't just roll over. We have to be careful. The concern painted on Matt's face mirrored the dread Jack felt. Yet, Each cautious word reinforced Jack's resolve. "Exactly," he replied, flashing a determined grin. "Which is why we have to be smart. Gather facts, build a timeline, draw connections." As ideas bounced back and forth between them, Jack felt his confidence blossom, turning into an active force propelling him forward. This was more than mere survival, it was purpose. Challenges transformed into puzzles to solve, and with every insight, every latent skill he unearthed, he realized the depth of his own potential. Suddenly, a commotion outside caught his attention. Jack peered through the rain-specked window, straining to see what was happening. A figure emerged from the crowd, one he recognized too well. The corners of his stomach tightened as the looming shadow of the figure closed in, vigilant and predatory. "Matt, we need to go," Jack urged, panic flashing in his eyes. "That's him. What do we do?" Matt's voice trembled slightly, and Jack could see the fear flickering in his friend's gaze. "Stick to the plan," Jack replied, summoning every ounce of clarity he could muster. "We can't act out of fear. Let us blend back into the crowd, find a place to regroup without drawing attention. It's our only chance." Matt nodded, and with adrenaline surging once more, they stepped out. The air felt charged, palpably thick with tension as every twist and turn felt like a potential exposure, an invitation for their unseen adversary to pounce. They stepped cautiously, the world narrowing to just the two of them, engaged in a dance with destiny. As they wound their way toward a secondary exit, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he had just ignited something far greater than he'd anticipated, a force that was building beyond him. The fleeting thought of whether he possessed the strength to see it through haunted him. But as they merged once again into the clamor, uncertainty twisted into solemn determination. He felt the urge to confront this growing darkness head-on. There was no going back. What they would encounter next could change everything, and Jack didn't know if he was ready, but there was no time to hesitate. The shadows were closing in, and now he needed to decide, was he prepared to face the very entity he sought to expose, or would this be his moment of reckoning, his ultimate test? Navigating through the press of bodies, Jack kept his eyes trained ahead, every sense alert. He could feel the urgency in Matt's restrained breaths beside him, a mirror of his own rising anxiety. This was not just a mission to gather information, it was turning into a crucible, one that would test his resolve and his very identity. In a world where shadows stretched like tendrils, Jack felt the dark presence of the figure trailing them. The close call had sharpened his instinct to survive and thrive, igniting an inner fire he had long suppressed beneath layers of metal and machinery. Yet, just as quickly, doubt crept in, whispering questions that rattled through his mind like loose screws. Was he really prepared to face the implications of uncovering deep-seated truths? Or would he crumble under the weight of the responsibility he had taken on? As they stepped into a quieter alley, Jack glanced sideways at Matt, whose eyes reflected trepidation. "We need to find somewhere to talk over what we've discovered so far. Any ideas?" His voice was steadier than he felt, a facade of calm. "There's a storage warehouse nearby. It's usually empty, but we should keep an eye out." "Let's head that way," Matt replied, the hint of a plan sparking in his tone. Jack nodded, feeling gratitude for his friend's presence, a stabilizing force amid the chaos swirling around him. Once at the warehouse, Jack surveyed the area more closely, assessing potential risks and exits. It was odd, this new instinct he had developed, an acute awareness of his surroundings that had once been dulled in the mind-numbing routine of his previous life. He guided Matt inside, the large space echoing their footsteps. "Now what?" Matt asked, breaking the silence that felt thick with unspoken tension. "We lay everything out, what we know so far," Jack suggested as he pulled out his phone, its screen illuminating the dust-laden floor. "Then we strategize. We need to figure out how to connect the dots without drawing attention to ourselves." They took turns sharing details, each revelation adding to the weight of their findings. Jack's initial spark of motivation now transformed into a clearer picture of their task. As he pieced together bits of information like a puzzle, he began to realize the broader implications. They were not just amateurs stumbling through tangled webs, they were uncovering something significant. He felt an alluring mix of apprehension and pride stir within him. This was new territory, but he had never been one to shy from challenges. "It's like every time we uncover a thread, it leads to a bigger knot," Jack said, shaking his head as he processed the complexity of their information. "Or a bigger risk," Matt pointed out, concern etched deep into his features. "It could get ugly very fast." "Yes, but think about what we're doing," Jack countered, igniting with a quiet fervor. "We're learning as we go, adapting. This is what professional growth looks like, confronting fears, not just running from them." A flicker of realization passed through him. He was evolving. The mechanic who once found solace in the simplicity of engines was now entangled in a labyrinthine investigation. Every step was stacking new skills atop the last. What had started as survival was now morphing into strategic thinking, a grounded grasp of interrelationships, but just as a sense of accomplishment began to root itself, a loud crash reverberated through the warehouse, sending shockwaves of fear through them. Jack turned sharply toward the noise, heart racing with the weight of the unknown. "What was that?" Matt's voice was barely a whisper, his eyes wide with panic. "That," Jack said slowly, "is our next test." With adrenaline surging once more, they both knew that whatever was on the other side of that noise could uncover their pursuit or lead them deeper into the unfolding darkness. Jack realized that not only had he stepped beyond the boundaries of his former life, he was now positioned at the brink of a new one, forged by risk and the courage to confront his own demons. As the echoes of the crash faded, a new question burned in his mind: would they emerge stronger, or would the shadows consume them both before they reached the truth? Jack's heart thrummed in his chest. The silence that followed the crash hung like a thick fog, each heartbeat amplifying the tension that coiled within him. The warehouse, once a refuge, felt like a cage now, its shadows morphing under the flickering light of his phone. Could they face whatever had just disrupted their calculations and plans? "Stay close," he murmured to Matt, feeling the need to protect his friend from whatever lay ahead. As he stepped cautiously toward the source of the disturbance, Jack's mind raced with possibilities. He had always repaired broken things, not confronted the looming specters of danger. Yet here he stood, propelled forward by a molten determination that both energized and terrified him. Each step was guided by instinct, a growing awareness of the stakes they were starting to play for their lives, their futures, perhaps something even bigger. "Do you think it's someone who knows we're here?" Matt whispered, his voice trembling. Jack shook his head. "We won't know until we look." It was a weak reassurance, but he needed to focus. Fear could paralyze or activate. Tonight, it was going to fuel their resolve. They moved into the adjoining room, Jack's gaze darting through the dim light, scanning for any hint of movement. The echoes of their footsteps faded quickly, only to be replaced by the rustling of discarded crates. Whatever had created that noise was alive. The possibility of confrontation stirred in Jack, not just with an unknown entity, but with a part of himself that had remained dormant for too long. "On three, we sneak closer," he said, gathering a sense of control. 1, 2, 3. They surged forward, braced for a confrontation. What they uncovered, however, was not a person but a large, fallen shelf, its contents strewn like confetti across the floor. A sigh of relief escaped Jack, but it was fleeting, replaced quickly by sharp instinct that someone or something might still lurk nearby, surveying them in the shadows. "Just the shelf," Matt breathed out, still tense, but with a hint of calm now seeping into his tone. "Let's check under the crates. Maybe something here connects to what we found earlier," Jack suggested, the unearthed overflow of crates now serving a purpose. He knelt, rifling through the remnants, surprising himself with how methodical he had become under pressure. "Jack," Matt's voice jolted him as he turned. "Look. There, partially hidden beneath a slanted piece of wood, was a stack of documents, eerily pristine against the chaos around them." Anxiety tangled with excitement as Jack pulled them out, wary but driven. "Could be leads, or it could be a trap," he warned, caution layering his thoughts. The pair quickly flicked through the papers, discovering names, places, and dates linked to the very truths they had begun to unravel. Each file felt like a key unlocking doors but also reinforcing chains. Jack's heart thudded once more, not from fear this time, but from a realization. They were uncovering something immense, delicate realities that threatened to shatter with any misplaced step. As he absorbed the implications, a sudden clang resounded from the main entrance. Instinctively, they both froze, eyes wide mirrors of shock as dread resurfaced, a stark reminder of their precarious position within this newfound reality. "Maybe we should leave," Matt suggested, urgency creeping into his voice. But something inside Jack whispered against the retreat. This was his moment, and running now felt like denying all the growth he had fought to embrace. "We can't just walk away," Jack replied, his determination flooding through him. "We're too close." "Jack, we might not have a choice," Matt insisted. As panic loomed in the distance, Jack felt his heart wrestle between instinctual fear and a powerful drive for growth. The shadows now felt thicker, the darkness pressing in around them with the weight of unsaid truths. Jack took a moment to steel himself, adjusting the narrative in his mind from survival to confrontation. He understood now what was truly at stake, not just their mission, but their identities, their very beings. "This is where we draw the line," he said, voice firm and resolute. "Whatever happens next leads us forward. We face it together or not at all." With the air thickening around them, he knew that this choice would define the path they were on. As his heart raced anew with apprehension, he prepared to move toward the entrance, ready to discover who or what awaited them there, but in the midst of his resolution, he couldn't shake the thought, how deep into danger were they willing to dive, and what truths might come to light when they finally faced their shadows. Jack stood at the crossroads of his transformation, each beat of his heart resonating with the urgency of the choice ahead. The files he clutched in his hand represented not mere pieces of paper, they symbolized the accumulated injustice he had chosen to confront. In that dim warehouse, he felt the weight of accountability pressing upon him, amplifying his resolve. As they edged towards the entrance, Jack's instincts reinforced their course. The tension had shifted, no longer dominated by fear but rather by a burgeoning strength within. "Whatever is coming, we can face it together," he assured Matt, meeting his friend's eyes with unwavering determination. It dawned on him that this was about more than uncovering a scandal. This was a fight to reclaim his voice and identity. The door creaked open under his hesitant push, revealing a group of individuals, a mix of angry townsfolk and members of the mayor's office. They were heatedly debating the recent revelations. Jack's breathing quickened as he stepped forward, the documents held tightly against his chest, exuding the newfound authority he had cultivated. "Enough!" A fierce voice rang out, silencing the crowd. Jack recognized it as Sarah, the journalist he had initially contacted. "We can't sit idle while corruption festers. It's time we stand resolute in the light of truth." Her fierce gaze swept over the gathering, meeting Jack's with implicit understanding. "Jack!" she called, sensing his presence. "Did you manage to gather the evidence I sent you about the mayor's actions?" The crowd turned, expression switching from anger to intrigue directed at him. Jack felt a surge of confidence course through him as he stepped into the center. "I have it," he replied, his tone steady, bolstered by a sense of purpose, "and it's time we confront the reality that some leaders thrive in darkness." With his declaration, Jack unveiled the stack of incriminating documents. Each name and allegation spilled forth like a tide of truth. The murmurs shifted to a roar of anger. It confirmed their doubts. His explosion of authenticity reverberated in their hearts, sparking a unity of purpose. Before he knew it, Jack found himself standing before the mayor, who was attempting to manipulate the narrative. "You think you can bamboozle this town with your hollow apologies?" Jack challenged, eyes narrowing to meet the mayor's, the fear he had felt dissipating into the air around him. "We demand accountability." The confrontation ignited passionate conversations among the townspeople. They caught fire at the implication of what they had witnessed for too long. Each word Jack uttered echoed with the struggles he had faced, propelling him forward, transforming doubt into resolute conviction. In that moment, he wasn't only a mechanic but a messenger of change, a voice that mattered. As the crowd rallied behind him, Jack experienced a profound metamorphosis. Those lingering threads of fear unraveled, revealing the solid confidence and competence he had long sought to establish. He had proved to himself, and the witnesses around him, that true courage lay in facing the looming specters of injustice. Jack understood now, the act of rising to the occasion, of confronting the darkness, was the apex of personal fulfillment and authenticity. The mayor, cornered within his own web of deceit, faltered under the weight of Jack's assertions, the cracks of his facade showing as townsfolk demanded transparency. External validation flowed from every corner, replacing whispers of doubt with chants of solidarity. Jack felt the shift, the palpable recognition that his voice could sway hearts, that change could flourish from individual decisions driven by integrity. When it all calmed, applause erupted from the gathered townsfolk, an acknowledgement of their long-overdue unity and collective insistence on reform. Jack basked in the realization that his life was no longer bounded by grease-stained solitude. Through the tide of adversity, he had emerged, not only recognized but celebrated as a catalyst for accountability. The garage faded into mere memory, as now, every piece of machinery he touched carried the strength of revitalized purpose. With a deep breath and a sense of alignment with his true self, Jack stood taller, solidified in his place and recognition. He had achieved a formidable resolution, proving to himself and others that a mechanic could be more than the sum of his parts. And as he stepped from that warehouse into the light of a new day, the echoes of hope surrounded him, propelling him toward many challenges ahead, armed with the indelible spirit of courage that would guide him through any storm to come. Now is the time to take action. You need to subscribe now to the channel and not miss out on the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and make this message heard far and wide. Comment below your reactions and theories about Jack's journey. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this inspiring conclusion. Your support means the world and helps spread stories of personal overcoming.